I do think any runner should do running drills at some point.
All right, so I am super excited to have Celeste Goodson back. We are going to chat about running drills. Celeste is from ReCORE Fitness and has done a little bit of research on looking into running drills, and excited to have you back on and tell us a little bit about kind of what you guys found out in your study. So thanks for coming back on the show, Celeste.
Thank you. I love your show, love what you do, so I'm excited to be back. This is fun.
Awesome. All right, so the title, External Loading of Common Training Drills, Ranking Drills to Design Progressive Return to Run Programs. Tell us what you did, tell us what you found, and we'll dive in from there.
Yeah, so I got curious a few years ago how various running drills compared with hill running, stair running, agility drills, jump rope, just all the different types of drills that people could be doing. I know we know like what are the pretty low and what we know are pretty high, but just kind of wanted to see how they compared with each other to maybe help improve return to run programming for, I think general population is pretty easy to gradually increase, but for who are dealing with musculoskeletal issues or injuries, it can definitely be helpful to better understand how they compare with each other. So that is why we did the study and reached out to Max at University of Memphis, and he was like, yeah, this has not really been quantified. So let's look at all these drills, and there are some drills that have been quantified. We know sprinting, we how much ground reaction force there is in sprinting, and easy running, but to look at all these other drills hadn't been done. So that's what we did, and obviously it was kind of a pretty easy research thing to put together. So we did
so needed. Like, yeah. I think we all walk around, and people that aren't in running, whether it's coaches or physios or things like that, I think they're probably familiar with like what they got in high school track, like A skip, B skip, those sorts of things. But the progression on what that looks like and how to fill in the gap, there really wasn't anything out there, and I love that this can be applied to postpartum, and that's, I think, why you did it, but also to, bone stress injuries and all those sorts of other things. So that's why I love this. So you can finally we're going first though.
Right. Yeah. Like, it's definitely applicable to any lower extremity injury. There are things, and you can talk about this in a little bit, but things you definitely want to consider depending on the injury. This isn't like someone needs to go from A to Z exactly, but that it's just giving us an idea how much force someone is generating on these drills.
So specifically, you looked at women, yes?
Well, we did half women, half men, experienced runners, so that they're familiar with the drill work, and familiar with all the loading that would be
that's probably a good thing that they know the drill, because some of those get technical, don't they?
Yeah, some of them are technical, and a lot of us don't need to do these technical drills. But if you are a professional runner, if you do want to work on your coordination and landing close to center of mass, a lot of these drills can be helpful.
Right. So let's dive right in. Like, what were the ones that really were kind of on either end of the spectrum here? Where did they fall?
Yeah, there's no surprise that the agility drills were on the low end, and I think the thing that I was most interested in is how they compared to easy running, and how hill runs and stair runs compared to easy running.
Yeah,
and also jump rope. Right. So where did they fall in? And so agility drills were lower. We categorized them into 4 categories. So there were, lowest was category 1, category 2, 3, and 4. Just to, if a clinician wanted to, stay in category 1, but pick ones that were appropriate for their client or patient, then they could pick some of those that were more appropriate. So ladder and very small hill in place drills were lowest. And then category 2 was introducing stair running, and ankle stair shuffle, wall knee drive, a slow wall knee drive. And that's one of my favorites to use postpartum. So I was happy to see that in the lower.
I was going to ask you what you were happy
it's a little different, right? You're not standing up running, you're pushing into a wall. And how does that affect the force, right? Or, think about mountain climbers. If you're doing them slow, you're on the ground, but you're still pushing some force into the ground, right? We didn't study mountain climbers, but
that's the next one. Right?
That would definitely, I would feel comfortable putting that on beginner, very, very beginner.
Gotcha.
Because I consider those like a drill prep. You're not even, your body's not on your foot, right?
And people are looking for videos. I think you mentioned just to email you to get the video and can get access to you. This is your Instagram handle.
Yes, I know this can be very confusing talking about some of these drills. But yeah, we have videos of them all. But yeah, so it's interesting to see where the wall knee drive.
Yeah.
That was in category 2, and some of the stair running. Category 3 was a few running drills. So things like a skip and skip, because you're skipping in between, right? And the Bulgarian split hop.
Yeah.
A lot of people like to do that one, and jump rope. So jump rope was category 3, and then and side jacks, karaoke drill. Those were the low end, running drills, which if you think about it, probably makes sense that, that's going to be lower than obviously butt kicks or high knees. So category 4, butt kicks, high knees, and those all came after easy running, which we would guess that they would. And then, it's just easy. Also helpful to see the hill running. It is really important to note the hill running that we did was a low, not very steep hill. So it was a 10% grade. Some people might think about a treadmill, and it's not a 10% incline. Okay. It was a 10% grade. So it was a low grade hill. A lot of hill runs are probably done on 20 or 30%. And so I actually would feel comfortable feeling like hill runs are generally probably in category 2. That's the one thing that would probably change about this study, because all the other drills, they're done on the same level surface. They're going to stay pretty consistent, but the hill running could change based on what type of grade you're doing. So I do feel like hill running could definitely change, and that could definitely be category 2, which is something we already do. We introduce hill running on postpartum.
And I think with hill running, the hill running, I think it sort of depends too. There's that extra facet of what symptoms that they have, because sometimes, prolapse, you might be better up or down. I've seen it both ways, and then leakage, kind of the same thing too. So I think the point here is you have a sense of where to put that drill in, but you also have to pay attention to that person in front of you and what their symptoms are and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Every individual, and like you said, this is for, right, these drills are for increasing load on the pelvic floor.
Right.
But they can be dealing with different things with that pelvic floor that, it maybe the progression of loading isn't necessarily what they need to be doing at that time. Like you said, the other thing I consider when I look at all the drills that we went through, I like to for postpartum, I like to take out the higher pelvic oscillation exercises.
Yeah.
Because those are something you need to consider in the postpartum population. So for instance, in category 1, we do have like a squat jump.
Mm-hmm.
And they all, like the mini jump, the small jump, and the bigger jump in place, all were in category 1. But obviously the jumping is a higher pelvic vertical.
Right.
And so for someone with prolapse or with major leaking issues, I would take those out. I wouldn't be working on those in category 1 because they are a higher pelvic oscillation. So I have like my different categories. Like if I'm, obviously we work with postpartum, but if someone was working with someone with an Achilles issue, they're not going to be introducing hill run, stair run, right? So postpartum, you're going to want to take out the drills that are the higher oscillation drills.
Yeah, that's what I love about this is you're like, great, I have this smorgasbord. This is generally kind of, increasing, demand. Now I have to uniquely kind of pick what is appropriate for that person that I'm working with. And it's not a recipe, so to speak, but it provides a system to start to pick out what you need. But I was reading this, I was cracking up because a gym I used to work out with, every single time, I think for like however many years I went there, they did the same warm up, and it was always, high knees, butt kicks, karaoke. Like it was the same thing every time. And just from what you've said, like there's so much variation in that.
Right.
And so you have these women that like already from like the first 5 minutes in, they're set up if they haven't, appropriately kind of trained for these different levels of impact.
High impact drill.
Yeah. Right. It's like why it's like the 20-year-old dude at the beginning of a workout is like, hey, let's warm up with jump rope or jumping jacks at 5:30 in the morning after you had your coffee. It's like, no, please don't do that.
Yeah, and that was another reason I did want to do it. Is sometimes I've seen people doing butt kicks or high knees to prep them for running, and I'm like, if they can do that, they can be running. You do not need to be holding them back running. So it is really important to know that like there are lower drills that could definitely work if they need help with the leaking and the prolapse. And some, leaking and prolapse, they may need to stay at some of these lower category drills for a while, let that tissue really adapt to the load, because it's definitely trickier with prolapse and postpartum. But yeah, like if you're doing butt kicks and high knees, you can be out there or hopefully you've already done some running and walking.
Well, I was so happy. I think this was a while back. You had posted that this was coming soon, and I was so pumped because I do think, especially in the last couple of years, you and I know that there's more information on return to run, and there's been some emphasis on strengthening and balance and that kind of stuff. And drills, again, unless you're in this space, it's kind of amorphous. And this is where I think really there wasn't any guidance or any information to kind of extrapolate. So people, like you said, you just kind of throw stuff up there, not realizing. Yeah, exactly. But it also, I think, clarifies this more because people think, oh, well, if I do my strengthening, then I should be able to run. And what we do know is that just straight strength gains aren't going to necessarily translate to, performance in running or things like that. So you really have to do these drills purely from a running perspective, not to mention impact management. So I was so pumped. That's what I was like, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, we need to talk about this, that the gap is filled. Now that there's more information out there, I really feel like the pendulum is swinging that, and you know how this goes. Like at first nobody has anything, and now there's like all this stuff, and people think that, oh my gosh, now I have to do this whole progression, when really we just have to be incredibly methodical and intentional. And you really have to know what you're trying to target with these clients and really kind of create that right recipe. So this is a lovely piece of information to help people figure out how to do that. And again, probably introduce some new drills, because most people are only going to know like what they learned in high school track, to be honest with you, because we didn't learn this in PT school. I'm going to tell you that right up front.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I do think it just gives you more tools in the toolbox. Pick ones to pick from. You need a low category exercise with prolapse or incontinence. Here's a bunch of ideas. Pick the ones that work for them.
Right.
Obviously through your assessments, you can test a few things. Is this causing leaking? Is this not? Another really interesting thing thought of through this study, which is not really mentioned in the paper, but single leg hop, and you've probably already noticed this with your clients. Sometimes doing a single leg hop, that's more loading on the body, but they may actually feel better with the single exercise opposed to the double. One, because the pelvic oscillations aren't as high, noticing whether single or jumping off both feet makes a difference with symptoms for them, that gives you somewhere to start.
Right. Right. And I think that throws people off guard when you run them through a screening and they totally think that the single leg is going to be harder. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and the clinicians too, I'm like, well, I've had people ask, well, they don't, you know, they're having trouble here, but not here. How does that even matter? And this really sort of starts to give attention and focus as to why that might be.
Yeah. And if you think about it, the pelvic floor is being more affected by a double.
Right.
Single. But that's not for everyone. Some people do just fine. But the people with prolapse or things like that, they may feel better with the single. And it just depends. Like you said, it depends. You test them out. And then you recognize, oh, maybe I'm going to stick to a little more single leg right now.
Right.
Double, move them up.
Right. Well, even I was thinking about this with run coaching too. I think it was 2 summers ago now. I did the Roadrunners Club of America coaching program, and I don't even remember them diving too much into drills, but I would have to imagine, you know, you're going to incorporate something if you're a running coach, or at least I would hope you would. How do you feel like, you know, for those of us that work with run coaches, how do we kind of take this information now and be like, hey, we're working with a client together. How can we kind of bring this up and incorporate it, especially if they don't do that many drills, or, you know, they have like their favorite 3 and they do the same with everybody. Like how do we start to apply this now for those of us who are, you know, physios working with other run coaches?
Yeah, I do think it depends on, you know, what the client's working towards. If you do have someone who loves track work, speed work, they are going to benefit more from the drills than someone who's just out running easy, not really into racing. But anyone who wants to improve their running economy, and we talk about this, running economy, like, yes, you can run a little more efficient, right? Not have as much bounce to your run. You're going to use less energy per that speed, right? Because people think, well, I'm more efficient, but as soon as you start running faster, you're increasing that load on the body. Just getting, just understanding, like, you know, for instance, these drills, we only did easy running 10K pace. Someone who does 5K pace, a mile pace workout, if they're sprinting,
right,
up to 4 times their body weight, those are going to be off the charts past all these drills, right? Yeah. So oftentimes someone who wants to get back to sprinting or get back to mile racing, 5K racing, and they're leaking, they're having issues, then, you know, finding their threshold, right, where they're at with these drills, and then knowing that it's going to be really important for them to be able to get to butt kicks, high knees, those will help them sprint without leaking if the pelvic floor issue is, you know, adapting to the load and the force.
I think that's a really important point, is not every person has to do all of these things. You got to figure out where are they trying to fit in, and what their needs are, because if they're just, you know, slow, easy run, they want to run a couple miles a few times a week, no plans on racing, and they can do that asymptomatically, you know, you may not need to dive in super hard. But if you've got that faster racer and they want to perform a little bit more, or they want to go, you know, do that quick turkey trot, you're going to need to dive into some of these things. I love that point, because I think that's another thing, again, now that more people are getting into this, if you don't know how to edit, then you think you have to do all the things, and it's incredibly overwhelming.
Yeah. Yes.
And I personally can't stand that, because I frankly don't have time for that.
Yeah, you just want to do what you need to work on the most. Right. And there is variability for sure in this. The other thing is, if someone, I kind of look at these drills as being really helpful for sprint power athletes, because, you know, generating that much force on the body, the pelvic floor, they can leak, right? You leak more with jumping, you leak more with running fast. than someone, I mean, you can always obviously have people have issues just running, period, leaking with running, period, right? But just getting them to running may be fine for them. But power athletes, sprint athletes, someone with major leaking issues, someone with major prolapse issues, it's going to be more beneficial for them to really work on drill progressions.
Very much, yeah. And I'm also thinking of like the CrossFit athletes that are like, oh, well, they hate running. And they're like, I'll do my 200, I'll do my 400, and they'll just kind of plod along, but they have trouble with like double unders or singles or things like that. This is another way to kind of break down those things. So if you try and address like technique and form and that's not doing it, or pressure management, how can you, continue to scale up and give a progression if there's a gap between singles and doubles or something along those lines, that there are other levels and drills and ways to play with impact in a progressive sense when you feel like, oh, well, if I only have this and this, it's really not, you need more steps, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's kind of where I'm thinking of too, that there's a great applicability with even people that aren't particularly runners.
Right. Yeah. And you can have those with pelvic floor issues that, like you said, it can be more of a pressure. Sometimes it's just a pressure issue, the load on the pressure causing it from the higher load. That's where these drills will be helpful. It can be an endurance issue with the muscles. These are going to help with that all. And, like we said, this is something everyone has to do. But if you do have someone who has trouble improving their cadence a little bit, maybe they really do have overstride or land out in front of them. It's not very common, but you do have some people who struggle with that. Working on drills is going to help also. So anyone who does want to be a little more efficient runner, you have more tools in the toolbox as well.
That's awesome. What about, like, let's say there's a mom listening right now, and let's say they don't have any issues, they're getting back to running, they can, run a couple times a week. They're thinking about, hey, I want to be a little bit faster, but I've never incorporated drills before. What are like the first three that you would say, hey, why don't you start with this? And if you're having trouble, then, obviously, speak with somebody who can help a little bit further. But what are maybe like the top three that they should think about starting with?
I'd pick a ladder drill.
Okay.
Start something like leg switch. That one, getting them moving quickly but landing close to center mass. Then I would also work on stair shuffle, where they're on the stair, moving their feet, down.
Yep.
And then the wall knee drive. I love that one. It's very similar to running fast, but it takes the load off a little bit. You can move your legs fast.
And that's where you're leaning up against the wall. Yep.
The wall and switching the legs.
Yep.
They're also, for a sprinter, they're practicing good mechanics, getting that. A key for like running fast is actually the cue is better is like hit the ground hard. Honestly, people think about lifting the knee up to go faster, but it's all about how hard they hit the ground. Sprinters who hit the ground harder are going to go faster. They're generating more force. They want to generate more force. They're able to go faster. People think about driving your knees up. Well, yeah, your knees come up higher because they're hitting the ground harder. They have nothing else, nowhere for those knees to go but up. Lift those knees up, you lose the ability to hit the ground fast, so it doesn't help. So practice hitting the ground hard, and then that's also what generates a little more force, gets that pelvic floor used to more impact.
I love that one because I think it's a great target for weak hip flexors too. And I'm totally in that category. Although I will say, I just got back from the Grand Canyon, 44,000 steps. My hip flexors were great. It was my adductors. Which makes me think, like, I had a conversation with Rich Willie like a couple months ago, and he was saying, like, with running, like, adductors are totally underrated, and plantar flexors. And I was like, oh man, girls got to do some adductor work. We checked off the hip flexors. We're good with that, going down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and then back up. But apparently my adductors are not on track.
Yeah, I suppose with all the incline up and down and trying to control that, control the road. But yeah,
I love that one against the wall. What do you call that one again?
The wall knee drive. And I love it. is it's just easy to vary the speed too. So start out really slow, really, really slow, and then work your way up to faster.
Yep. And even if you're, if you're pre-introducing impact, that one's an easy one to add as far as strengthening goes with, a TheraBand loop or something along those lines to just introduce that concept. That's why I love that one so much, is there's so many options for variability. And then you mentioned the ladder drill. A lot of these, the variables, you can change the speed, but you can also play with physics and that lever arm and multi-directional stuff. And again, I think those are great things. If you look back on return to run screening, we're starting to look at some multi-directional things there, and further away from the body. So those are awesome. So for you, now that you've kind of, you're processing this, where is your mind going now after kind of finishing this up? Because inevitably you finish something and that sends your mind elsewhere. Where do you want to go now?
Yeah, probably just sharing drill tips, ideas, putting them in phases, putting mountain climber, and people already do this, but, mountain climbers to wall knee drive, working on that progression is an easy way to think about it postpartum. Yeah. But just, sharing more tools in the toolbox for clinicians and trainers and coaches to use. I do, pelvic oscillations could be studied more. It's not really something that's been, recognized as what increases pressure on the pelvic floor, but the higher you jump, more pressure is going to be landing on that pelvic floor. So, pelvic oscillations, also, maybe looking at hill running, the 20-30%, percent grade, how much that changes the impact. But I would definitely be starting clients that need more of a slow progression on a more steeper incline, as long as they don't have any Achilles issues. And you do have to be careful. You can't just have them doing 10 really high, all of a sudden they do need to be strengthening the Achilles and the calf. And, like you said, strength is so important, but also so is adapting the muscles, the bone, the tissue to the stress of running.
Yeah.
Strength doesn't do that. It's different. They're both very important, but
it doesn't do it. Yeah. And I think that is the thing for me. If I look back over the past few years, that really, I don't know if it caught me off guard, but it was such a aha moment isn't even it, is just kind of understanding how important it is to look at all the other factors in impact management and really just honing in, like Rich really said, kind of on those plantar flexors. And I think for so long, even if you go and like over in the running world, it's been so glute focused, and there's so much that the ankle and the foot does to manage this. And my new thing is that the pelvic floor is like the mom. Mm-hmm. When everybody else doesn't hold up their end of the bargain, mom ends up kind of doing the rest of it.
Right. And if that foot was doing a better job. Yeah.
Right. But again, how many moms do you see that, if they try to go back on their own, if wasn't their pelvic floor that was limiting, they end up with shin splints, or they end up with ankle issues or things like that. And that's what keeps them from going on. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think there's such an opportunity to, and people forget, like if you had ankle sprains as, in their youth or all these other things, they come back and haunt you a little bit. That's a way to kind of dive into this, make sure you're shoring up those things from the past and, cleaning things up so you can manage impact. That's the one thing I think that is really just blown open the doors of, hey, it's really not just this. We really have to look at this in a very broad spectrum, and drills have to be a part of it. It just, especially if you're going to go faster, especially if you're going to compete, especially if you're going to, have those trail runners. Or that's the other thing too that I was thinking about with this is I think some of our physios are doing a great job with just the regular recreational. I run on a sidewalk, I run on a paved trail, mm-hmm. but the trail runners, the ultra runners, those sorts of things where you're really starting to, you've got to hop from one rock to the other, you're going to face plant. That's where I think this is so incredibly important too, because they didn't have a way to dive into that a little bit more, that agility piece. So
I do want to add, I don't want to sound confusing. I do think any runner should do running drills at some point, right? It's going to help them run more efficient, increase the stiffness in their tendons so they can have more, absorb the force properly and run faster, have more sprint. But like I said, not everyone needs it to return to running. So you will have those uncomplicated and smooth clients who will do fine. They don't have to be going through a progression. But for sure, as a coach, if you're coaching them long term, or if you're coaching them, I'm always including drills. So I don't ever want someone to think I don't do drills with someone. I have everyone do drills at some point. It's just that someone may not need 30 of them to get them to return to run.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, what I've started to do now with moms, because those moms that they need to run for mental health, or that's that thing that they just need to get back to do, making sure that you're doing at least one core exercise, at least one hip lower extremity exercise, and at least one impact sort of thing. And that's where I think drills could be, because again, moms and runners, A, we don't have time. B, we want to just get out there and go. And again, referring back to my conversation with Rich Willie, I said to him, I was like, well, do or die, what's the one thing you would do? And he was talking about adding some of that just like impact active warm-up sort of stuff to the beginning. So that would be a great way to really kind of ensure that you're hitting a lot of kind of boxes with that active warm-up and introducing some of these things. So I again, as soon as I saw this, I was so excited. I think I barely waited a second to contact you. I'm like, I want to talk about this.
I know. I'm excited because I'm like, yes, you are on top of it. I love it.
Totally.
I talk about it. And sometimes I'm not great about putting forward social media stuff, and I need to do a little better job of that. But
so
you know,
good though, with all
I just talk.
It's so, but that's the thing though. Like, I mean, you've been such, again, like I think back to, we didn't even know each other, a couple of years ago. We've had such great conversations and really kind of think along the same lines. So for you, looking ahead, last question here, as we're looking ahead at the new year, where do you see trends going in postpartum? We've really, I feel like, had this beautiful time in the last year or so. We've got more research coming out. We've got some of our amazing postpartum running pros kicking ass, and just pro sports. And I mean, Alicia's doing so much with Ann Mother, and we're getting breastfeeding in tents at marathons and crazy things like that. What do you see ahead in, for 2023?
I really hope this, I mean, gosh, there's several things. I really hope to see women just get a lot more hope that even if they're struggling with some things, that like sometimes that's what these drills do. Maybe they are having trouble running, but they do these drills and they can feel that there's progress.
Yeah.
Like, feeling better. I feel like I'm doing something similar to running, and it gives them hope. And so they don't necessarily have to quit running. They break it up. They're doing these drills. Just hope that if they are really struggling with something and they want to get back, that there's so much help now. There's a lot more help than there was before. And there's a lot of, everyone's doing a better job looking at everything. We're looking at REDS, we're looking at sleep and nutrition, we're making sure those things, and mental health. Women are getting the help they need so that they can feel like themselves again. Really, that's half the struggle.
Yeah. And then challenges. Where's our biggest adversary? Where's our biggest challenge in the coming year?
Being extreme, right? I just feel that so much in the fitness world, maybe in the PT world, that people will take results and take them to the extreme, or say, you have to do this before you do this. You have to do this before you do this. And just try to come up with very specific rules. And it doesn't play that way for everybody. And then everyone feels like, even the return to run guideline, maybe we're going to find more research on really how much time this tissue needs to recover. Right. But also I see both. I see the ones that really need to take longer returning to run. I see the ones that do just fine.
Yep.
You know, returning to gradual run walking at 6 weeks with core pelvic floor strengthening.
Yeah.
They do okay. There are those people that do okay. And, you know, you just have to, like I said, more research, understanding how long some of these specific tissues take to heal may help with that a little bit, you know, but we don't have those answers right now. So it is a very individual. How are you feeling? How's this feeling? Let's gradually progress and help women get to where they need to be.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Like you said, I feel like anytime we have this surge in good new information, the pendulum swings. We've got nothing, now we've got a lot, and things become absolute.
Yeah.
And I think when they become absolute, that's where the danger is.
Yep.
But for those of us that you still want to use your brain and the information, it dials it in, it confirms your suspicions and be like, all right, well, you can just make things so much more individual. But I think with that becomes then the frustration of, great, there's more people out there working on this stuff, but that is not what was intended by that. And then you get,
I know.
Did you read beyond the abstract?
Yeah, that they're guidelines, and not necessarily rules. And I can see there is some judginess. Hey, you're running before 3 months postpartum, and there are some that do just fine. And we have to be careful.
All right, if you want to find more about Celeste's work, you can find her on Instagram at ReCORE Fitness, and then your website, I think, is recorefitness.com. If you want to check out her maternity fit, oh my Lord, maternity fit splint. It is my favorite splint to use with clients now, you know, during pregnancy and postpartum. All right, well, thank you so much for being on, and thank you so much for taking the time. Research is not for the faint at heart, so thanks for diving into that and sharing this with us, and can't wait to see what's next in the coming year for you. Thanks again for being on.
Thank you.